Today, I am talking Stoicism with an Oxford-educated neuroscientist. Dr. Sarah McKay will be giving her expert opinion on the philosophy, its principles, and how you can use it in your day-to-day to live the good life.
Wisdom comes about through life experiences that you have. I don't think you can speed that process up, but I think you can understand that it is something that you could work towards.
The telos, or the end goal of Stoicism, is to live in accordance with nature. And part of living in accordance with nature is to be a good person. And the Stoics actually had like a definition of what good, bad is. So they believe that virtue alone is good and vice alone is bad, and everything else like wealth, health, fame, reputation, all of that is just indifferent, because you can use it for good or you can use it for bad. But they believe you can't use the virtues for bad. So what they believe is, in modern day terms, is like justice, wisdom, courage, and temperance. That is good. Temperance is moderation, self-control. They believe that is good. And that's what they believe. Do you agree with this model?
Yeah, it seems fair, yeah.
So if I feel like today in modern world, like especially if you agree with that, that's what it means to be good. People are struggling to follow this framework, that people are struggling to kind of be good. And I personally feel like it's because what has been put in front of us as our desires is kind of the wrong thing. You know, it's like people are now chasing fame and money and success.
Probably depends what age you are.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, do you feel like people are chasing the wrong thing?
I've just turned 50, so I think I perhaps have a very different perspective on what I think people are doing than, like, say, my teenage sons and how they would perceive what people are chasing and doing. I don't necessarily see my friends and so me and my husband just had a joint 50th birthday party about a week and a half ago.
Happy birthday to you both.
And my birthday was in January. We're just spending the year celebrating because life is too short not to, do all of the things. And I don't, within my group of friends and the people that we were celebrating with, see necessarily that. I may have felt that when I was 20, or maybe my sons might see that amongst some of their friends. I know that there was this, recently I saw some data coming out about what kids in high school, what careers are they thinking of pursuing, and being a YouTuber was number one. And that's not what anyone my age is thinking of doing. So I don't necessarily think that is the case at every age and life stage, I think. And particularly something like wisdom and temperance, in terms of thinking about it more in an emotional regulation way, I think that you gain those skills with the more life experiences that you have. I don't think I have as much courage as I used to. But when I became a mother, I had less courage to put myself in risky situations, and perhaps there's biology behind that. Justice, I haven't kind of thought that much about. So I suppose I would kind of think of it more like in a lifespan perspective, that these virtues have got like trajectories, and we would see these kind of ebb and flow in different people at different times, and depending on what life stage they're at.
Okay, because that's interesting, because the Stoics kind of believed you could work on these virtues.
I think.
Yeah, you could.
Absolutely, I think you can work on them, yeah.
Do you think that is, even from a neuroscience point of view, can you see any way, like, even if it's like neuroplasticity, to, I don't know, like, I don't know how to frame this, but like gain more wisdom or gain more courage or gain more...
I don't think that you can gain more wisdom by hurrying through life. Like, I think wisdom comes about through life experiences that you have. And the wisdom I have now at age 50 is very different. And so my comparison now is just thinking about my teenage sons. So my oldest son's got his final day of high school next week, and then he's going to do his final exams, and then he'll go off to university. So I genuinely have objectively more wisdom than him because I have lived more life and had more life experiences than him. He can work towards gaining wisdom, but is he going to gain wisdom by studying at university? You know, that you can only, I don't think you can speed that process up. But I think you can understand that it is something that you could work towards. Temperance, I think, is perhaps a skill, depending on what you mean by that. If I think about it as having a temperate emotionality and temperate mood, I do think that with age, emotional regulation becomes easier. Courage, I think that you have more of that the younger you are. And I think perhaps courage and bravado and sensation seeking they're developmentally necessary when you're younger, because you're kind of like, say, a young person like leaves the safety of the family home and the nest and needs courage to kind of make their way out into the world and to kind of grow and to be building, and they're kind of in a building phase of their lives. And so we know that sensation seeking and risk taking is sort of biologically driven in teenagers, and courage is kind of wrapped up in that. And then the older you get, the more perhaps safe you want to keep yourself, because you've made your way out. You don't need that. Justice, I don't necessarily see as that to me feels more structural than personal. I'm not sure what I think about that word and how I would make meaning of that. So yeah, I mean, certainly these are all temperance and wisdom, I think, are perhaps skills that you could work. Temperance is a skill you could work towards. I think wisdom is something that just comes about via life, living life. Not necessarily older people are wiser, but chances are you'd think that you'd hope they would be. Courage, I think, is perhaps it depends on how you see that play out. Being socially courageous might be easier when you're older versus younger, because you care less about what other people think. So you take more social risks.
I think your perspective's interesting, actually. Like, from what I'm understanding, it's like more of a maybe these virtues are ingrained in us for a survival aspect, as like the timeline. Like when we're younger, we need courage for certain things, and then wisdom's greater when you're older.
Yeah, and if you think about even the analogy sounds a bit cutesy, but a baby bird leaving the nest, the first time it flies away, it needs courage and it needs bravery to want to leave safety. And then perhaps as you get older, you're in the nest. You built the nest. You don't need to leave it. So I think these are not just kind of moments in time that you can practice. I think that some of them have got a life. I feel like the only way I can approach them in a way that makes meaning is through a kind of a developmental sort of psychology perspective.
Okay, so I'll stick to wisdom from my point of view, how I like to see things. It could be wrong. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. Is I kind of believe that through awareness and openness, I can become more wise through situations. I know, like you say, like experience and time makes you wiser, but I do believe there's a lot of elderly people out there that have been closed off. They're not very open, and they don't have that awareness, that they don't really gain the wisdom over time. So the way I see things and the way the Stoics saw things is they saw life and difficulties like a sparring partner. So like a difficult sparring partner in boxing is good for you. It would train you well. An easy sparring partner wouldn't really train you. So they saw like difficulties, challenges as like you face it and then you learn something from it. But it's that awareness and openness to the challenge of a difficulty. So I sort of feel like when I'm facing a difficult challenge, I go into that with openness and the awareness, thinking like I will gain some wisdom from this. I'll gain some courage if I can deal with this correctly. And in the way I'm interpreting it is like the next time I face a situation like that, it's easier. So I feel like I've gained some courage, or I've gained some wisdom. Yes,
100%. And that makes sense. And you're going into that with like kind of openness and curiosity, like you said, and not everyone necessarily approaches every hurdle in life or whatever in that way. So yeah, 100%. Like that's going to speed that process of learning up, I suppose. I think older people, and I'm just thinking of some recent research that's come out. Actually, I've got it around here on my desk because I was talking about it with someone else earlier today. And because I was kind of talking about these different sort of skills, because we tend to think about and valorize and grieve the skills that we have when we're young and fit and healthy, both cognitively and physically, and we kind of just always perceive them as being lost as we get older versus thinking about what we kind of gain, and as I said, different trajectories of different sorts of skills or virtues, as you might call them. And there's a conversation emerging around this concept of flexibility in daily life and how cognitively flexible you are, and whether you're kind of flexible around things like, your beliefs and your adaptability, and how much kind of control and predictability and routine you need. And younger people and older people are more rigid in their thinking styles and flexibility, whereas middle-aged people are more flexible. And we don't, and there's data supporting that, but we don't know. But within each age group, you've got masses of variation, right?
Yeah.
There's always masses of, you could have someone who's young, who's way more flexible than someone who's old. So I'm sort of thinking about that in terms of what you're saying. I'm not really sure I have a particular point to make, but just we kind of think about openness to experience and curiosity. And I guess if you've had good you've had difficult times that you've gone through in life, and you've come out the other side and you've had a good outcome, that reinforces that approach. I'm just thinking about some people I know that have kind of had a series of shitty things happen to them, and it necessarily hasn't always had a good outcome, and whether Stoicism would help them or make them, whether they would reject it because they wouldn't have had because their life experience wouldn't have taught them that even coming out the other side is good. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think you've got like kind of degrees of challenge, and for some people they'd be like, I'd rather have never had that challenge at all.
Yeah, I suppose, do you think, like, the way the Stoics see it is that challenges happen regardless, unfortunately, like, whether it's good or bad, and it's the lens in which you look at it. There's a lot of Stoic quotes about this.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that does work for some people some of the time, definitely. I think that would be other people that would perhaps have been so traumatized by a challenge they haven't got the capacity to have a Stoic lens on it. That's not my life experience, but I know some people that have gone through some pretty tough stuff. And obviously the only thing you can control is your perception and your approach, but that's sometimes easier said than done, right? It's very easy to say that. It's harder to live through it.
Yeah, just an interesting point you actually raised was about the flexibility, because I'm just a little bit confused, because my understanding, I guess everyone's kind of understanding, is when you're a kid you're more flexible, or I guess it's the neuroplasticity when you're a kid.
Yeah, this particular measure is looking at cognitive flexibility, and like the kind of the factors they're looking at are like stereotypical behaviors, the ability to adapt your task or switch tack, that you need for predictability and control and routine, and like your thoughts and beliefs. And younger people and their teens, and then older people are less flexible than people in midlife. And there's a kind of like a U-shaped curve in there. So kids have plasticity and they are able to learn, but they prefer, and was looking at people from ages 8, I believe it was ages 18 up. It was actually ages 18 to 80. And people in their 20s are less flexible than people in their 50s, who are more flexible than people in their 80s. So there's a U-shaped curve. So it's not just about the capacity to learn. It's almost like the need for predictability and ability to cope with predictability or not, and the need for routine. And it's a U-shaped curve.
Okay, that's interesting.
Which I think is interesting, yeah. And you know, like belief systems. I mean, you look at young people and their belief systems; they can be so dogmatic, like drives all. You know, like as a parent of a teenager, it could drive you crazy because they like hold on to these beliefs and they become massively dogmatic and almost like kind of activist-like, and their fundamental belief about a certain thing. And then as you get older, you kind of like, hey, actually, I can see the sort of shades of grey. I can see where you're coming from, and you can be kind of like you can pivot and you can kind of see both sides. But then when you get older, you're back into the kind of you hold on to your beliefs a bit tighter again. So think about it like that. That's what that literally. Here's a U-shaped curve for you looking at that data.
That makes sense to me when I'm just looking at like old people and young people, like that the image makes sense of like the stubborn old man and the young activist.
Yeah, the young activist. Yeah. And so think about it like that. And I don't know, and this research here, like, is this like just driven by biological aging? Or is it just that when you get to a certain point in life, like parenting has been the most massive, like it is the biggest self-help course you can ever do in your entire life. Like you fundamentally learn to be flexible and just to hold things a little bit more loosely because you literally are having to be with these other people who aren't you, and you can't control and predict and do everything for them. You just kind of have to, by force of nature and by family life, go with the flow more. And so whether or not that this is where this dimension kind of comes in, like kind of through those parenting years, like those between your 30s, 40s, 50s, and then before and after that, you can kind of just do your own thing. You can be more selfish or inflexible. You can't be inflexible when you're in the parenting years, and so maybe that's where that's falling out. I don't know.
That's interesting. You've spoke quite a bit about control, and just from what you've said about control, I feel like you might agree. You might agree with the Stoics, you might not. But one of the most popular principles of Stoicism is the dichotomy of control. Like when people first learn about Stoicism, that's like one of the first things they ever learn. And I'll say a quote by Epictetus. Epictetus was actually a slave turned philosopher, and he learned about Stoicism as he was a slave. And he said that some things are within our power, others are not. Within our power are our opinion, our motivation, our desire, and aversion, and in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are health, wealth, reputation, and office, and in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. And this is kind of, this is the modern view of this dichotomy of control. And the way I see it is always like, I don't control the external world, but I control how I respond to the external world. So like I say, you can dance in the rain or sulk in the rain, it will rain regardless. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, that's the serenity prayer, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
That's Mel Robbins' Let Them. I mean, that's just different packaging. It's just that it's probably the original time it was written down and passed through the generations is through the Stoics. So, I mean, I think that fundamentally, I mean, that's, we all of the kind of self-help books, I suppose, in a way, not all of them, but many of them, Man's Search for Meaning, that's that theme that runs through all of that. And that's interesting because, again, if I reflect like from a developmental perspective, as a young teenager, when your brain is going through all this sort of adolescent brain development and you're refining all of those social cognition circuits, the imaginary crowd, or less imaginary now that we've got social media and phones everywhere, but what other people think about me and what I'm thinking about them is kind of like so consuming, and you're so self-conscious, and you're so other people are so fundamentally important. And as you get older, you learn that no one else cares as much about you as you. And I try and tell my boys that. But yeah, I think I absolutely agree with that thread. And that's just now, I suppose, packaged up in different ways for different people. So I think that, the younger you can learn that, the better. But sometimes you have to learn that the hard way around rather than just picking it up from the Stoics would be great if we all listened to what we were told when we were younger and believed it.
Yeah, it took me till I was 18 until I read the Stoics. I read the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. You actually mentioned two really great books, Let Them and Let Them Theory and Man's Search for Meaning. Man's Search for Meaning is like probably my favourite book. It's the book I always say recommend to everyone. And in Stoicism, like anyone that is a fan of Stoicism, they always mention Man's Search for Meaning. It's like it's Stoicism.
And I think all of those. I remember years and years and years ago when my mum and dad, I was in my early 20s and my mum and dad split up. My mother was devastated and she was reading a book by a woman called Susan Jeffers, and I can't remember the name of the book. And it was essentially like Mel Robbins' Let Them, but, written in the early 90s. I wish I could remember the name of the book. And it was the same kind, it was exactly the same message, just told in a different way for a different audience. So I think it's probably lasted for a reason.
Yeah, I've always that's what I always advocate for Stoicism is I try to learn about all these philosophies and stuff. Like I was looking into Buddhism and Taoism and Zen Buddhism, and none of it really made a sense to me. And then I read the Stoics and it made sense. But looking back, they're all kind of teaching the same thing. It's just that the packaging is more relatable to me.
I'm just trying to look up the name of this book now. I'm not gonna be able to. Wasn't feel the fear and do it anyway. End the struggle, and such a cheesy title. End the struggle and dance with life is what it was called. I remember my mum reading that, and essentially it was about this idea that there's certain things you can control, and it's typically within yourself, and what you can't, and how to not kind of give in to the negative emotions of what the things out there that you can't do anything about are.
Has there been any studies or has anyone looked into kind of like you were saying about the crowd that you're seeing in
the imaginary crowd?
Yeah, the imaginary crowd. Is there? I don't know how you would look into this, but personally for me, I feel I used to live like that. Like I was always worrying about all these things out of my control, and it was causing a lot of stress and anxiety. And now through just changing the lens, the way I look at the world, it wasn't just like it quickly changed. I had to put it into practice for a while, but that stress and anxiety is gone. Is there any research into this?
Well, that imaginary crowd is a term used in developmental psychology to talk about what happens in adolescence when your social awareness becomes heightened. And again, it's all part of that developmentally normal leaving, the safety of the family and like your parents and, your siblings being the center of your world to like, you've got to kind of break free from that and find, a new tribe and whatnot and move away. And that happens with all mammals. My dog here grew up when he was a little puppy and moved away from his mum. And that's, what happens with all mammals. And so that kind of sort of heightened social awareness, I think, is intimately part of brain development through that phase of life whereby that social cognition circuitry becomes very, very hypersensitive and plastic and kind of requires social experiences to wire it up appropriately. And you hope you have great social experiences to do that. But to be sensitive to social experiences, you become sensitive to social experiences, so other people matter so much. And as you're gaining those kind of abilities to regulate your own emotions and reframe, and, as your theory of mind and your empathy and your meaning making about other people kind of develops and matures, it's kind of natural that you go through that. And there's lots of literature on the neurobiology, but also the developmental psychology of that phase of life. It's almost kind of like a biological rite of passage to go through. It's not bad or unhealthy, and a 15-year-old should not feel that way. And if they read the Stoics, they would not. It's more like it's just kind of a biological process that happens. I sometimes think that we I don't want to pathologize it. I don't think there's a problem. It's problematic. It's just like, you eventually kind of come out the other side. You came out of it by reading Stoicism. Other people might just come out of it through just having other kinds of life experiences. As you get older, you eventually kind of care less, I suppose, what other people think.
So could it be quite harmful to villainize that? Like if it's natural, we try and villainize it and completely squash it. But are you saying at a certain degree it's healthy?
I think it's developmentally normal to feel that way. And so I think the problem is when it starts to impact you in a negative way, not just emotionally, because an emotional response to something that you feel uncomfortable about is okay and normal. It's how you kind of react and respond and recover after that. You're never not going to feel negative emotions. You're never not going to feel socially awkward. You're never not going to worry about what other people think about you. I suppose that teenagers could be vulnerable because a negative experience socially, they could ruminate, they could perhaps socially withdraw, perhaps they end up, with a mood disorder or depression. I wouldn't villainize it, but there's probably unhealthy trajectories that you could go down. Whereas if we kind of understand that that's like the desperate need to belong is, that's a brain kind of mandate. Belonging is a brain mandate. And when you're a teenager, you're right in the kind of halfway zone between belonging in a family and wanting to belong in a new crowd of people and trying on different identities and different ways of being. And you're constantly surrounded by lots of different other people your age. When you're a teenager, you go off to university, there's a whole new social circle. Those experiences are happening right at the time when your brain is almost requiring those experiences. So that sensitivity is kind of built into your biology. So I don't think it can have negative outcomes, but I don't think experiencing it is a negative thing. It's just a developmentally normal process. It's a bit like learning to walk or learning to talk.
That process of like you're saying of finding where you belong. If you try eliminate that because you see it as you villainize it, or you resist it so much and you just push it down and you stay stuck, can you get to like age 30, 40, 50, 60 and then still have to go through that process? Is it something you have to go through?
Well, I think what we probably understand about this is that it's almost like this is a sensitive period of adolescence. So adolescence is like a biological, neurological, social, physical, identity shift. It's this process that you go through. And the social shifts are just kind of part of that. It's like this, your brain is in this complex ecosystem of other adolescents and you're all kind of going through it together. I mean, that happens in all mammals in the animal kingdom as well. All like young animals go through these different sort of social processes. So if you I think that that's where kind of loneliness and social isolation comes in. If people finding it so tough, they isolate themselves. And then they never get the chance to experiment socially and figure out who they are and how to interact with other people and make meaning of that. Different people will follow different paths through. And that's why I guess I wouldn't want to, we can talk to young people about these principles. We don't want to make them feel bad for feeling something that's going to be felt anyway. Then we're injecting shame into it and guilt.
Okay, I only asked that because I feel like when I was younger, I kind of resisted it all, stayed stuck inside my own head, and now I'm kind of facing, in recent years, I'm facing these things that I feel like I should have faced when I was younger. But that's just my perspective.
Yeah. Well, you'd hope that socializing isn't facing down a challenge. You hope that socializing is kind of fun and light and enjoyable. But everyone's different.
Yeah, I didn't see it I seen it as a threat. There's an exercise in Stoicism. It would be really interesting to hear your point of view on this, because I feel like a lot of people disagree with it. Called Premeditatio malorum, which is just premeditating on the difficulties that lay ahead, the challenges that lay ahead. So I would do it when I was younger, as like when I know I'm going to work, I know the bus could be late, it could rain, the bus driver could be rude, people on the bus could be rude, my boss could be rude. Like, these are things that happen quite frequently, so I'm gonna imagine they happen and accept that they happen. And what it did for me is it really just like eased the worry about these things happening, because once I accepted that these things happen, they no longer disturbed me. I went in, when it did happen, I was like, oh, I already accepted that. Epictetus, in his discourses, says, when you go to the public baths, know that people will push, people will be rude, people will swear, people will splash. These are just things that happen. Your goal is to just remain good, remain you, and not be disturbed by these things.
I suppose so long as you do the second part, so long as you're going, well, this terrible thing might happen, but I will cope with that, and this is the approach I will take. Because if you're only going to the first step, this terrible thing will happen, then I suppose that's rumination, because you go, this terrible thing will happen, this terrible thing will happen, this terrible thing will happen. It's like you'll just constantly think about that. You're not then going, and, if this, then, the if then approach, if this happens, then I will do this. So long as you are building into that kind of, imagining the future, the visualization scenario, you're embedding a positive action of how you're going to respond, and it's a good, appropriate response, then I think that that's probably fine. I think some people with mental health issues may not necessarily be able to manage the next step. I might just get caught in that first part of it. So I think also imagining like the positive things that could potentially happen in the future as well is quite good. You can imagine you can practice an emotional response to a scenario in advance. Perhaps, you've got a job interview coming up, or you're going to give a public talk or whatever. You can practice feeling a positive emotional kind of response around that, and, imagine what it will feel like in your body, and, the expressions you have in your face and who you're looking out at or whatever. And you can kind of rehearse that in advance. And then when the scary event or the challenge arrives, you can then roll out your pre-practice positive kind of response to it. I think that that's the approach I would take. I don't know whether that's part of what the Stoics are saying you should do.
Actually, it's funny you say that. I spoke to someone yesterday just about this topic, actually, about this exercise, and they said the exact same thing. Like, why don't you just imagine the good thing happening? The only thing I'd say to that is...
Well, not the good thing happening, but your positive response to the thing that's going to happen.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
And I suppose it depends on whether, like, say you have to give a talk, that sort of bad thing that's happening, that's an opportunity that's come your way that you can have a good experience with.
Yeah.
Versus
that's
I'm going to give a talk
and
everyone's going to laugh at me. I don't know whether I'd make that story up. And it depends, I guess, how predictable if someone's going to splash you at the bath or the pool or whatever. Is that really something that you need to be concerned about? I don't know whether I would constantly be always only thinking in advance about what's going to go wrong, not about what might go right.
Okay, that's actually really interesting. I've never thought. It just in my head, what I'm imagining now is like, and I'm going to try this because I think it's going to be valuable to me. But when I go about a situation, because I used to always, if I had like anything to do with public speaking or a meeting, anything, like in my head, I'm like, this is going to go the worst. They're going to laugh at me. I'm going to freeze. Like anything that could go wrong went wrong in my head. And the way I'm liking to picture it now after you've just described that is like, I could be talking to these people and whatever, they could laugh, they could do this, but I'm quite excited to think of my positive response to this. And I don't know, it's given me, that gives me a feeling of, like confidence and
and probably the more likely outcome is not that they're going to laugh at you. Like the more likely outcome is that they might be really interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, that's actually, you've that's really
like you've got to have you've got to add some probability in there too. Like the likelihood of driving to work and having a car accident and becoming paralyzed is very low. Should you think about that every time you get in a car? Or should you think about this is, what's more likely? Actually, maybe there's going to be bad traffic, and instead of getting frustrated, I'm going to use that time to listen to a podcast that I've been saving up.
Okay, that links well to
there is lots of research on like visualization, both in terms of visualizing your if then response to an event that could potentially be a roadblock or a challenge, and not just this bad thing's going to happen, I better be prepared, but like if this happens, here's what I'm going to do instead. And then also you can practice your emotions in advance as well, because your emotions are like thoughts. You can rehearse an emotional response to a situation, and then that's quite good, because then you're not having to use any of like your cognitive capacity to manage your emotion regulation. You're doing how you rehearse. It's the same as rehearsing a talk, and then that frees you up to engage and interact and respond in the moment with the other people.
Wait, so is there like evidence and studies to show that like rehearsing something positively will lead to that thing turning out better?
No, but you can practice. Well, you can't predict what's going to happen. But say, like, because I use this, I did this process years ago when I gave a TED talk. It's the first kind of big kind of talk I'd ever given. And I was very nervous, and I wanted to do well because it was a TED talk. Like, you're not going to do them every day. And so I worked with a speaking coach who came out of she was like, come out of theatre, like a classically trained kind of actress. And so we did all of the things that you would do in theatre. And I now do acting classes actually, and there's so many similarities in terms of this, and that we practiced the talk. So the words were going to come out of my mouth in the way that, we'd intended. But then we also practiced my emotional response in advance, both before I went out on stage. So I wasn't going to be overwhelmed with fear. I would feel like, excited and ready, and not like crippled with. We practiced feeling positive feelings. We practiced the feeling I would have as I walked out and stood on the stage and looked out at all of those people. And it would feel big and overwhelming, but I would be overwhelmed with it because I'd already rehearsed the emotion I was going to have. And then we rehearsed the emotion I would have when I walked off the stage. I didn't want to feel, oh my God, I'm so relieved that's over. I'd be like, I did this amazing thing. And so that meant, and that was a reasonably predictable situation. I wasn't rehearsing the rafters falling down from, people standing up and shouting at me, because that's the likelihood of having to rehearse that is so minimal. There's no point. So I then I performed, and I felt in the way that I'd rehearsed. And that's what you would do in theatre, right? If you were acting, you could go on stage every night and do the same play for 100 days in a row, and you could genuinely conjure up an emotion and feel that emotion because you've practiced that emotion. So that doesn't mean it will go well, because things might happen that you can't control, but you can rehearse how you will feel.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, that's what I meant by my question. Is like you rehearsed to see it as have this exciting feeling, and it like by well I mean for you as an internal perspective. That's kind of what I meant, and I guess it did go. Yeah. It did go,
and that's what visual and like athletes practice that. You watch. There's a Kiwi, an All Black, Damien McKenzie, who is he usually plays number 10. And when he does his conversion or something, and you see him, and you can see him visualize, and you can see him doing it in his mind's eye. You can literally see his mind looking at the ball, and then he puts this big grin on his face. My mum always says he looks a bit like a scary goblin. It's quite funny. But he gets this, like, he smiles because he's then also rehearsing this joy he's going to feel as the ball goes through the post. And so, that's been part of sports psychology for a really long time, not just rehearsing the actual motor skill, but rehearsing the emotional response that you have, because an emotion is just something that's constructed in your brain in a context based on what's happening in your body, and you can pre-package that up in advance and roll it out. It's quite useful.
It sounds very useful. I've heard people explain it before, but I think the way you're explaining it makes a lot more sense to me. There's another like It's kind of a visualization thing. It's very popular in Stoicism that would be interesting to hear your thoughts on, is Memento mori, which is just Latin. It means just to remember your own mortality. So the Stoics kind of, there's so much behind this. They felt like all fears were linked to the fear of death. They felt like people ignore death and then never live because they just believed that Seneca says we act as if we have 1,000 years to live. And so the Stoics thought if you can remember that you're mortal, then you can live fully, live without all this worry. A lot of, as Steve Jobs says, all fear of failure and embarrassment falls away in the face of death. And the way I do it is like, number one is as I'm talking to you, I like to imagine, and not imagine, just to remember that this could be the last thing I ever do. And Marcus Aurelius says perfection of character is to live each day as if it were your last, without frenzy, without apathy, without pretense. So the way, like, a lot of people are like, oh, does that mean I party, go out every day, skydive? The way I'm seeing it is like, if this is the last thing I was to ever do, this conversation with you, I have to know that that's enough. I have to be grateful that this is beautiful, it's amazing, this moment is everything, and I have to live it fully. And it is very beneficial to me. I know it's very beneficial to other people, but I try not to really teach it too much because I know that death is a huge fear of people. I had a huge fear of death. I couldn't sleep at night fearing death when I was younger, but now it seems to be beneficial to me. I don't know what you think of that.
I'm not sure whether I have any neuroscience to add to that, but it makes a lot of sense. I think perhaps part of it also depends on people's kind of spiritual beliefs or faith system or whatever they have around how they approach death. But I mean, it makes sense, but I'm not sure that I can add anything to it.
Okay, that's okay. It's just a practice that really helps me. And then also another practice that helps, and it's not strictly Stoic, but the Stoics talk about it a lot, but I think everyone talks about it, is gratitude, the positive effects of gratitude. Especially, like, I don't know if there's any like research into the effects of gratitude.
There's lots of research into that. I think some people take it just feels like it's become a bit twee almost, a bit kind of cringe. But yeah, I mean, I think gratitude makes your attention focus on positivity. And wherever your attention grows, if it's a positive emotion, you're going to be more likely to experience that again. We know if you're constantly focused, like chronic pain, for example, that's horrible and you're constantly focusing on it, and so it makes it worse, and so you become hypervigilant and it makes the pain worse. You think more about it, and you kind of end up in this kind of cycle. And so gratitude, I suppose, is the opposite of that, and that you try to focus in on and be thankful and grateful for small things. And certainly I try and do that. And I'm definitely doing it much more than I ever used to. And I'm definitely much more emotionally regulated and calm and happy and grateful than I ever used to be, because it does feel like time's going quickly. My kids have grown up so fast. Our old dog died last year and we got a new dog. And it's like, how did that all happen, So you have to be grateful and make the most of things. But I'm not sure about the neuroscience of that, but certainly if I think about attention and where you choose to focus your attention, because it's a limited resource, towards what is going well and you are grateful for, is definitely, I agree. I'm with the Stoics on that. Yeah. I don't know whether I'm adding anything wise in here at all, like, to be perfectly honest. I've kind of run out of neuroscience at this point, I think.
No, it's good to hear your perspective. I always believe, like, I always see my, like, power as I have my unique perspective. That's kind of my only power in life, I guess, in terms of, like, teaching people.
Yeah.
So like, what I mean by that is I'm not teaching anything new. When I teach Stoicism, like you said with Mel Robbins, with Man's Search for Meaning, it's kind of a lot of the same stuff, different perspective. And I see my unique perspective as people that think like me maybe will resonate with what I say. And I feel like as you're explaining these Stoic principles, or you're responding to them, people will connect with your perspective that maybe don't connect with me. So I think it is it's valuable. So I'll just go to justice. The virtue of justice is, and there's a thing the Stoics say about doing good is, I think it's Marcus Aurelius says, you've done good, they've received it, why then like a fool do you wait for a third thing? Is there any research, or do you have any knowledge on like the because from my perspective, doing good is enough, regardless of the outcome, regardless if you get thanks or rewards for that good. Is there actually anything in our brain that indicates that doing good feels good?
There's some research that I kind of glanced at the other day, and so I haven't looked at it in any depth, but it was talking about positive mood and was saying that one of the strongest shifts in terms of mood is doing something good for someone else versus trying to make yourself feel happier. So I think that there was something pro-social in that. There's something about being a social mammal, about being a human, that is in there, but I didn't look at that research in any detail. So I probably can't comment anymore, but certainly, I mean, we're social mammals from the moment we are born. What we need more than anything else is the love and care of another person. And every age and life stage that we go through, what's the strongest protective factor or this architecture around us in bad times? Where are the best times? Whether it's childhood or adolescence or parenthood or, old age, is other people. And so I'm sure that that's why justice is kind of tied up in that if we're alone, we're lonely, everything, we die younger. So I'm sure that
is that true?
Where that principle comes from. Yeah. Your loneliness and isolation. I mean, there's being, loneliness is kind of a perception of not having social connection. You could be surrounded by people and be lonely. Enjoying solitude is different from being socially isolated. And so there's the negative emotion of it all, which, any kind of persistent negative mood state is bad for your overall health, bad for your cardiovascular health, bad for your immune health, bad for your brain health. But then being socially isolated as well is this, like the kind of the day-to-dayness of it all. Like if you're, older or younger, you might need help getting medical care. You might need someone to get your groceries. You might need someone to, get you up and dressed every day. So there's the kind of the pragmatic aspects of it as well. And so I guess justice is somehow this Stoics concept of justice is somehow tied up in the fact that we're social mammals.
Do you know if there's, because I keep hearing that like even though we've got social media and we're becoming more social, it's actually, people believe that it's leading to us being more isolated.
Social, you're not interacting with other people, you're interacting with a phone or a computer. That's not social media. Like, that's not you. This isn't a person. It's a device.
Do you think that's leading to people feeling more isolated because they're swapping real exchange, real connection with it, like say just a device?
And they aren't practicing interacting with people. So yes, absolutely, that's very clear. I mean, it's great for connecting with, like my mum lives in New Zealand, my husband's parents live in Dublin. Like we use devices to connect and talk and interact with them. But it's, I wouldn't want to be spending all day, every day, that being the only means of communicating and interacting with other people, because this isn't another person. It's a electronic device. So, and this is where social media lives inside this.
I guess there's been a lot of research into that as well, right?
Yeah.
Would you say the negative effects of social media use? Is there much research into that?
Oh, there's lots and lots and lots. So yeah, I mean, some of it's controversial because there's upsides and downsides, and perhaps we need to be regulated. We need to talk about it. But Australia, rightly or wrongly, I'm kind of have heard claims both ways and kind of think like give it a crack is banning social media for under 16s in December. So we'll see what it does. It's an experiment Australia's going to try. So I definitely think that younger people are more vulnerable, but then I also don't think people my age are invulnerable either. I think there's a lot of talk about at every age and life stage you're at, whether we're talking about anxiety or brain fog or problems with attention or ADHD or forgetfulness or disconnection. And so much of it is because our phones are such a massive suck of our energy. And even if we're not on them, they're there and we're kind of micro like tasking, we're multitasking in a micro way, even when our phone is in the room and it's not in our hand, we're constantly having to it's constantly sucking some of our attention, which is reducing our capacity to focus on other things that are like real and right in front of us. And I also think it's, like our brains don't know that if there's a war on the other side of the world, that it's on the other side of the world when it's almost live streaming to us in our hand. It's horrific. And we're expected to absorb that and then also like reflect that back to the rest of the world in some like correct way. And there's things like that kind of going on at the moment, which in the world, in the zeitgeist, whatever you want to say, which I don't necessarily think are very healthy. Once upon a time, you watched the 6 p.m. news, the TV was on the other side of the room, you watched it for half an hour and then that was it. There wasn't this constant suck of information that's sort of draining all of our resources all day long. So I mean, there are upsides. I've built a business online. But I think there's also enormous consequences to that.
I do see upsides, but like I say, my phone's just there. And I've always felt like this. There's like a psychological weight. It feels kind of heavy. Even though I'm not holding it, it feels like it's kind of weighing down on me.
There's research, you can do studies looking at like, working memory studies, verbal recall studies. We can do cognitive testing and they've done it like the phone's, in another room, in another building. You'll get a 10 out of 10 on a score or whatever. If it's next to you and it's turned off and it's face down, or if you're mucking around with it, your scores will plummet, even if it's next to you and face down and turned off, because you kind of know it's there, and you're constantly kind of almost going to pay attention to it. It's just so like salient and becomes so relevant and so like integral that it's hard to like put down. It's almost like another baby. It's like our brains, when we go through pregnancy, rewire and reorganize. So the maternal brain attention is focused in on your baby and keeping your baby alive. And it's almost like a phone is kind of like reorganized and rewired our brain. It's like this little baby that must be kept alive. I was doing a podcast earlier today, and one of the women on that said she was sitting there the other night. She's a mum and she was breastfeeding one of her babies. And then she was scrolling through her phone, looking at photos of that baby. And then she's going, what am I doing? Like, I can actually just look at the baby. I don't have to look at photos of the baby while I'm holding the baby. And she said that was a bit of a wake-up call to her. So
I did the exact same thing recently with my daughters too, and I'm looking at cute pictures of her. I'm like, this picture's so cute, and I'm showing my partner, and I'm like, she's just there. I can see her. Yeah, yeah. It's so weird.
I know. Me and my husband do that now. We're always, because the boys are older, we're always looking at photos of them when they were little because it was just so cute. And now they're less cute. They're more like handsome. But it's very different. So that's why we've kind of got to this point that we decided, like, in 10 years' time now, we're going to look back on now and go, oh, they were the good old days, and the boys were teenagers and they still both lived at home. And instead, here we are now going, oh, remember they were toddlers and they were so cute. So we were like, what now is going to be the good old days before we know it. So we better make sure these days are good. that's the kind of approach that we're taking. I don't know whether that's Stoicism,
Yeah,
but
no,
that's our little
it's a good
family.
approach.
That's our current family. Well, the boys think it's cringe. That's mine and my husband's current motto.
No, that's wonderful. And yeah, the Stoics agree with that. It's like a lot of people live in the past, get caught up in the past, which isn't real. It's just kind of imaginary. And a lot of people live in the future either out of worry or out of longing for a better future. And it always happens. They look back on 10 years and go, oh, that was the good old days. It wasn't really the good old days. It's just the same as it is now. Different circumstances, but a lot of people miss this moment we're in now is the good old days.
Yeah,
eventually.
Yeah, it will be soon. Yes, we better make them good. So yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I remember I seen a post. Some mother posted about dirty handprints on things, and it really impacted me because it was just after my daughter was born. And she was saying, you might be getting mad at all these handprint marks everywhere, and it might frustrate you, but at some point in your life, you're going to wish that those handprint marks were there. You're going to miss them.
It makes me cry. But it's hard when you're in the middle of that. I was talking to was out walking the dog yesterday, and there was this mum, and she had these two little boys who were both under the age of 3, and they were going in different directions, and she was trying to keep them under control and get the stroller out of the car, and I just said, "Are you okay? Like, can I give you a hand?" And then she says, "Oh, I feel like," I said, "Oh, how old are they?" And I said, "Oh, you are in the weeds. Like, I know where you're at right now, what it feels like." And she says, "I feel like I've lived 9 lifetimes today already." And I said, "I know, and it's only 9:30. I said, I remember that feeling, but I said, there's nothing I can say to you now. Oh, it gets better. That's just," I said, just hang on in there. Like, all I can do is express my solidarity to you and can I give you a hand?" So it was, yeah, but you look back and you remember that, but when you're in the middle of it, it's just being told to appreciate it is not sometimes what you want to hear. You just need to survive. You're in survival mode, so you just need to get through.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to read some quotes from the ancient Stoics, and just make of it of what you want.
Yep.
So I'll read a quote, then just say your thoughts on it or whatever you want to say about it.
I'll try and not be long-winded.
Okay. So Seneca, he was the tutor to Emperor Nero, actually. He was a politician, but he is a famous Stoic. He said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body."
I think that's generally true, but not always true, but generally true, yes.
Why generally? Is
because I think some people have terrible experiences that they would rather have never had, and they're not always going to see positive growth or outcomes.
Epictetus, he was the slave turned philosopher, he said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters."
Yes, I completely agree.
Okay, and Marcus Aurelius, this is one of my favourite Stoic quotes, is, "You have power over your own mind, not outside events. Realise this and you'll find strength."
Yes, and Mel Robbins has just packaged that up now as "let them." So, yeah, 100%. Still resonates today.
Yeah, I feel like "let them" theory is like a modern interpretation of Stoicism.
100%. She would say that too.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense as well. Stoicism, to get like the understanding I've had to read all these ancient books and kind of practice it for a lot of years. I feel like with Mel Robbins, it's just like you can read the book and get it, I suppose.
It's just packaged up in a different way for a different audience at a different time, It's just, but there's nothing new under the sun. That's been happening for millennia.
Yeah.
So
that's everything. I would like to know, because I was looking into what you do with the Neuroscience Academy. If I don't know if you just want to explain that for just anyone that might be interested.
Yeah, for sure. So I teach online professional development courses. The Neuroscience Academy is a course in applied neuroscience and brain health. So there's 17 core lessons where we do everything sort of from very basic brain anatomy and physiology, neuroplasticity, looking across the lifespan, looking at sort of development, maintenance, and aging. We look at concepts like cognitions, emotions, motivation, habits, and then various aspects of kind of lifestyle health and wellbeing for brain health. Things that people will know about, like sleep and exercise and nutrition and social connection, etc., but very much through a neuroscience and evidence-based lens. And so people come out of the end of it with a not a degree, with a certificate. You get 40 hours of professional development training and that. So it's taught partly online through pre-recorded lectures and readings and resources, and then we have a weekly 90-minute Zoom Q&A discussion type session.
Okay, is that would you say that's something for someone like me that has no clue, or is it for someone that knows a bit more about neuroscience?
Well, you have a clue. It's for people who have not necessarily any background in neuroscience. You don't need to have done, maybe you only did science at school and now this is the first time you've learned any biology. So there is quite a lot of content, but people, once you join, you can do, like say there's a course starting September to December this year. So you can join this cohort, you can set the quiz at the end of that and then never have anything to do with it again, but you do retain all of the online content and you can join in each kind of future cohort over the next sort of few years. So I've been teaching it for 10 years now, and I've got some people who did the very first round in 2015 and they still come back and they might pop up in a Zoom, some random week, and I'll be like, oh, wow, hi. And, I've seen people kind of come and go over the years. So once it's like a cult. Once you're in, you're in. So yeah, I teach kind of packaged up. And then I've written a book recently, one of the For Dummies brand. People may be more familiar with MYOB or Excel spreadsheets for dummies or playing guitar for dummies or whatever. So brain health for dummies. And it's kind of an accompaniment to the curriculum. So all of my best ideas packaged up with a lot of lame, cringy dad jokes and things like that in the For Dummies style. So the book kind of accompanies the course as well.